I moved to Nebraska about 30 years ago, and my house is kind of up on the edge of the creek. And when I first moved there, I picked up the habit of fishing. And so at one point I tried fishing in Shell Creek, and I didn't catch any boot fish. In fact, I didn't catch any fish at all. And there weren't any fish there to catch. And that was like about 20 years ago when it really got bad, really bad. So one day I went down by the creek and to the Shell Creek Bridge, and I looked, and there was this guy. He was wanting some clean water, so because that's what the Shell Creek Watershed's about. So, okay, then. So what I'm going to talk about is the Shell Creek outreach. Excuse me. So how do we do outreach? Who do we talk to? What's the Shell Creek message? Where do we say it? And how do we project our message? So how do we do it? Well, who do we talk to? Number one, we talk to farmers, lots of farmers. But how do you know who they are? How do you get their names? Who do you know who's going to be your audience? How are you going to do that? So there's a number of places that you can go to get the information so that you know who to go talk to. One of them is NRDs have irrigation certifications, and they'll give you the list. They probably will give you a list like that. You can become an NRCS volunteer. If you do that, you then gain access to FSA and can get some of their records, get access to the records where they hook up the farm to the names of the farmers. Environmental Working Group puts out a website, and it provides farm payment lists for all operators. So you can go get more names there. You can ask farmers who farm that piece of ground next to them. You can look at plat books, and you can talk to local ag retailers. They may not want to necessarily share with you, but some of them will. So how do we do the outreach? What's our, excuse me, the first thing we have to do is we've got to have our message. So, and what was our message? It wasn't that we have to clean up Shell Creek. That was not our message. We got to clean it up. No, that wasn't our message. In fact, the Shell Creek itself didn't get much mention at all. So when we talked to people, the focus was on things that the farmers can do to help his own operation do better. If farmers do better, we figure then the Shell Creek would do better. And that's the logic behind kind of how we proceeded. So the next one, where do we deliver the message? So basically everywhere we can. We go nose to nose, go to farm sales, anywhere where the farming community is, and talk to people. Just talk all the time. Another thing we did, we had meetings, and we joined up with the Shell Creek Watershed and the Extension, UNL Extension. We joined up. We had quite a number of meetings, actually. Some of them had NRD involvement also. We had these types of meetings like out in the field, where we had kind of look, eat, and leave field demos. We had classroom meetings. We did a number of no-till meetings, just on, in general, things that would improve the creek. We sponsored a road trip to no-till on the plains out in Salina, Kansas. And the intention is to give the farmers tools and encouragement that they need in order to install practices with confidence. So then we also did mailings. And we all know probably that the farmers get tons of advertising and mailing. So the rule I learned a long time ago, when I was a district salesman for a seed company, I learned a long time ago with farmers is, if you can't get a message on a postcard, it likely goes in the circular file. You know what the circular file is. So it's important to give a mailing sort of a big hook so they will look at it anyway. And so what I used to do I was, Gene mentioned that that we had some people out knocking door to door. I was actually the second. There was a fellow that got ill and died first, and then I was kind of the next one in line. And so I was kind of one of the main door knockers, though the original group, they did that on their own for about a year, and then they decided they needed to get somebody doing it a little more regular. So one of the things I did as part of that was I sent out postcards. I had 4 postcards, and I sent the postcards out before I made my calls. And so I like a month before I start 1 a week, and then about a week later, I'd make a call. And one of the postcards was, it had a picture of a dime on the side of it, on one side of it. They flipped it open. It was a folding postcard. And you flipped it open, and it said, 1 thin dime, the thickness of the thickness, the soil can replace it if it's eroded. So that's if you got more than a thin dime, then your soil is going away. You're mining it. And then I had another one where don't ship your soil to Louisiana. They don't want it. That was one of them too. But anyway, and then the next thing we did, and I did, was door-to-door calls. And so I made a big list of all the programs that were available. There was like about 25 of them. And some of them were NRD programs, some of them were NRCS. DEQ had the sewage program, or the sewage part. There was a number of different programs. And then when I did my call, I would just go down through those real quick to kind of see if they were interested. And if they were interested in it, we would talk about it. If they weren't, we just went right on. We hardly said anything much about it. So what you try and do is you probe for and kind of home in on problems. So if you can find a problem, then you've got a chance that you can fit a program to it. So if a guy says, I always used to ask him if, okay, when you're combining, is your combine going like this when you're going across the field? Well, if it is, that means you've got erosion, and you've got quite a bit. So here I've got you might be interested in like a grass waterway in those areas, or maybe a terrace or whatever like that. So you try and find the problem and then see if you can't fit something to it. And oftentimes the guys would be interested in something and actually take action on it. So you kind of try and make opportunities, like for instance, the no-till, it saves the soil and it saves the water. So, and then I made up a form, and it had basically that list, and then I checked each of these off as I kind of talked to them over the kitchen table, and then went down to the bottom and had a sign off. Well, if they said that they wanted to sign up for no-till, or if they said anything that any one of the programs they were interested in, I'd have them sign off. And then, okay, here, I'm going to turn this into the NRCS, and then they'll get back to you. And that way, and with farmers, pretty much once it's signed, it's a done deal, and that's it. So that was why that was important. And then I give the form filled out to the NRCS, and they knew what the guy was interested in that way. And so when he came in to talk to him, or if he didn't come in, they'd call him within a week or two and say, oh yeah, that guy was out there, you want to come back and talk to him? So we'll talk to you about what you talked to him about. So how do we project our message? Well, watersheds are huge. Shell Creek is about 305,000 acres. So what we had to do is we had to attack it like you'd eat an elephant, one piece at a time. We focused on one chunk a year, and that one would get calls, door-to-door calls. I tried to call on everybody, and each year I tried to call on everybody that was in that area that was farming, either the operator or the owner. And then we just wanted to make sure that everybody in that chunk knew that we were there and that we had these programs, some of them which were just special for that year. It only was that year and that one chunk. And we tried to get everybody signed up that we could that way. And then when we finally got down through our watershed, and I think it was 5 of them, is that right? think it was 5. We had 5 chunks. When we finally got done, we had one last year. You know, okay, this is it, last chance. Anybody that wants to, if they didn't get signed up before for something, this is it, and it's over with. So then that was the end of that part of it. So how do we project our message? Well, the SWIG, we started out with an email. Gene's, I'm duplicating what he's got. We got some things done, and then we tackled bigger things. But most of the things were done at first up on individual farms up in the watershed. And that phase that ended maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we kind of did that first phase. The Lower Platted North helped us by engaging an engineering firm to look at Shell Creek and to identify some other opportunities we had in the watershed in order to, we need to be maybe changing our focus a little bit, which they did. And since then, we've entered what we might call a phase 2, and we're now starting to attack problems directly in the stream, like the stream bank erosion and things like that. So I got a couple of pictures of from a drone of the couple of the different infrastructure things. And in this case, this was about to take out this bridge. The erosion was on Shell Creek. And so we did that. Next slide there. And that's kind of a shot from the straight down on the whole thing. That was a pretty extensive project, but we've got, at this point, we've got a couple of, 2 or 3 like that are finished. As far as future issues, we know that we've got problems with the stream bank cutting. The bed is now 15 feet below grade in a lot of places. We've got infrastructure threats, a lot more. We've got extremely high coliform bacteria counts at times. We'd like to see more done with that at this point, I think. We've got some, we think, potential for wetland restorations. And we're still having some issues with flooding. Highway 81, which is one of the main north-south roads across Nebraska, was closed several times this year. So we'd like to maybe get eventually someday when that wouldn't be happening except for once in a blue moon. So it wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. Anyway, so we've just completed a project that's on the north side of the creek. It was a quarter, and it's had a number of different projects there and practices, like terraces and grass waterways, sediment basin, and no-till. So it was kind of a package of a whole bunch of environmental things there. And then it happened that downstream from that, there was a farmer that was having a problem with a head cut starting upstream there. It came out of that field that we protected up above. Well, it was going to wipe out a wetland that he had on the place, and he wanted to preserve that wetland. And so we were also going to have a drop structure or something like that in there, and that will be one of our next projects coming up. So I want to emphasize that Shell Creek Watershed Group is a volunteer effort. We look for willing buyers. We don't tell anybody they have to do anything. So we recognize that there are different farming practices and everybody has different needs. So some people are interested in one thing, some people are interested in another. But we also recognize that the many things we promote can benefit the farmer and the stream both. And I think that's probably one of the key things with what we did. So how do we work so who do we work with to help the Shell Creek? First off is hundreds of farmers. Much of what we do requires the farmers to have some skin in the game. We want to find ways to help the farmer and help the stream at the same time. So who helps us? There's a big, long list, and Gene happened to have that list. I didn't know he had that, but I don't know. I think if you check the list, I think we both got about the same list.
Pretty much.
And that was about it. So get down here to the right notes here. Sorry. Yeah, so in summary, we've touched on how the Shell Creek Watershed Improvement Group got started, how we got the next generation involved, and then also it's a bit of a peek at what our outreach was, and then some perspective on future plans for the watershed going forward. The message really that's really important here today is that the state of the watershed can be a watershed can be improved, and that a small group of just ordinary people can do that just by taking a first step and persisting. Walt Disney said it best, if you can dream it, you can do it. And that's kind of the story of our watershed.